I'm sure already read this. So what we have right now in terms of the norms that are embedded in the current modes of development, and part of that is a neoliberal project, but that's only part. It was also, in a way, in the Keynesian period, is a sharp emphasis on modes of growth that produce extreme inequality. An impoverishment of the middle classes, this is happening throughout the world, and a sharp growth of the poor in the world. I have a project that I call Expulsions. I think that what is happening is way beyond simply the question of inequality. I think the system is simply expelling. If you look, for instance, at the 2009 data, the 2010 census of the United States, for the first time in 4 generations, the sons and daughters of the middle class have less formal education than their parents, have making less income than their parents were in relative terms at their age, and far fewer chances to own a home. And this is a story that repeats itself. I mean, the United States is a bit extreme, and in its extremeness, I think, it becomes heuristic. You know, it tells you a tale about a systemic trend. But the other issue that I want to bring in, when you look at what are called poorer countries, often they think that the lack of development is the issue. I think that that is actually a distortion of what has really happened, which is a certain kind of development has been imposed, export-oriented. You go from smallholder agriculture to producing for export. So say in a country like Brazil, where a lot of small farmers basically produce, you had mid-sized farms producing black beans, which is also a food staple. Well, now it's all soy for export. That has generated hunger in areas where before you didn't have hunger. In Argentina, where I grew up, same thing. There never was hunger in the countryside because, you know, the wealthy had a cow, it grazed, etc., etc. And so now what we have is hunger because everything has become sort of industrialized towards export. So this issue of development really needs to be checked. You have to look at it in the eye, so to say. Now I'm going to move here. I just wanted to show you, well, let's see. Here, you know, this interaction of structural processes and policy actually matters. So if you look, structural processes, have their own influence, but policy does also. This is a graph. Just look at the shape of it. It's an extreme shape. And what it really reflects is, goes from 1917, this is the United States, and in milder form you have that just in about all the developed countries nowadays. It goes from 1917 to the current period, to 2009. And it shows the share of national income appropriated or received, by the top 10% of earners. Earners we're not adding here capital gains. It's just like from a job, like you have a job. Well, it reached 47% in the 20s, the 30s, the Trente Glorieuses, where they have it. And then that sharp fall, 1942, and then the flatter thing, and then it goes up. Those are the adorable Keynesian years, where, the government regulated the economy. Then it goes down, it's still robust at 33%. It goes down from 47 to 33. Now it's back up to 47. So policy, the fact that the economy was regulating actually mattered. This doesn't prove that, this graph, but it shows an impact. It shows, wow, is that. And the interesting thing, if you read the literature of the time, when you have, the expansion of a middle class, no matter the racisms and the discriminations, by the way, certainly when it comes to women and blacks, etc., but you have the expansion of a prosperous middle class, modest middle class, not a super, middle class and prosperous working class. So that was nice. And the notion is, God, we discovered the algorithm. We now know how to have a country with a vast middle class. Well, then 1987, the curve goes up again. So this is to me very disturbing, and this is also the rate of income, etc. Just to give you an example, a city like New York is a machine. 5 minutes? Do I have? Or no? Somebody was going to show me the 5-minute sign, but I think they forgot maybe. I have, okay. She tells me now. I told her, I offered the answer, she gives me the answer back. Very good. We do that then. So a city like New York is a machine to make wealth. So there always is going to be inequality, and especially in a highly, differentiated economy, there's no way. But here is a difference. So in 1979, i.e. 1980 census, the top 1% of earners in New York City received 12% of the earnings produced in the city. In 2009, the 2010 census, the top 1% got 44%. Now, by the way, I should also mention this question. When we enter a zone of such inequality, the household and the community emerge as very strategic spaces, and that is often a space where women are a critical actor. And I want to complete, I need to find a black slide. There has to be one there, and so I'm going to complete the story. And so I want to just talk about a study that we did a while ago of immigrant households, Latino households in New York City. And we chose families that were husband, wife, and children. Those were our sample. And we were interested in how does the immigrant woman, in the context of a city like New York, sort of become a different type of subject, partly, you know. And here, to make a complicated long story, so I'm simplifying, very, very short, two modalities. So one of them was, and these were all Latino women. I grew up in Latin, so yo hablo español como una nativa, no? For those of you, so you can judge, you can tell. So I could develop trust, you know, in a way with them. And so the women, mostly the speech acts of these women, were, I work, and both parents working, by the way. I work to be a better mother and a better wife. So that was the speech act. In the meantime, most of these women actually wanted to stay in New York. They did not want to go back to home countries. This was mostly Colombians. And the men wanted to go back. Now, what was happening, and this brings me to the second point, what was happening in these households? These households, what was happening is that the men basically worked in warehouses, etc. They disappeared during the day in these warehouses, factories, trucking, etc. They didn't have the bar in the corner, you know, as they would have back in Colombia, where they could change the world, you know, over beers, you know what I mean? That kind of talk. They came back home at night, and there was no public zone. And the women were actually the public actors. They had to deal with the school, with the state apparatuses at the local level, the school, the police, and the hospitals. They became, and this is something that you see in a lot of areas where you have modest communities, etc., that the women emerge as the public actors. And it's like if you use postmodern theory, the man becomes the feminized, I have troubles with that, okay, but just for those, the feminized subject, and the woman is actually, you know, the equivalent of what historically we might have thought as the man. But what I want to emphasize is this notion that at a time of inequalities, increasing poverties, increasing vulnerabilities, both in the global north and in the global south, the locality, whether it's the city, the neighborhood, etc., becomes important. Informal economies come back, and they're not all about just miseries. So this is a very interesting time in that sense for women in particular to take on certain roles that historically have not been attributed to them, though they may have had it, in fact. Now, I have a very big sign. Do you see it too? Oh, you don't see it. You're spared. Big red sign that is telling me I should shut up more gently. So I am going to, and then we have a bit of time for questions. Thank you very, very much.